Hey there, Goa fans. This is Mark DJ Solitaire here with episode 133 of Retro Goa Explorations, my weekly series in which I present in each episode one of my favorite tracks from the 1990s Goa Trance psychedelic dance movement. We are still in the 1997-98 season, so tracks that I first encountered or got to know in the autumn of 97 through to the summer of 1998. And this is one that I remember very distinctly because it was a track that I played out at the time. It was one of the few tracks that I got on vinyl because it was not available elsewhere, and it was graciously given to me by my compadres at Dragonfly. It was either Richard Purple or Darren, who was running the label at the time, who gave it to me. And there was one occasion, which there's been film footage of from in another video, where I played it because I had to oscillate between dimensions, alternate between DAT and vinyl, just because of the DJ setup. So. And this is a fabulous, fabulous track, and I've been waiting a long time to be able to feature it. So I finally got some fantastic background information on this truly stupendous musical, cosmic journey. We are going to listen to the track Planet by Semsis. So Semsis, a project with Ian Riv, who we know from Cydonia, and Nick Smith. And Nick has graciously given me tons of information, tons of background. So the Goa Professor glasses are going on so that I can read notes from his wonderful background information. So now I had first come across their name with the track Pile, which I don't think I ever had at the time, but it was featured on a lot of compilations. So in 1997, when this vinyl came out, Nick had a studio in Brighton, and it was called the Sound Vandal Studio. Sound Vandal was the track on the other side of this Dragonfly single. So for equipment geeks, he had a JD 990, Nord Lead, Novation Base Station, Nordhoff Pulse 101 SH5 over there. And what he would often do is just put ideas together in his studio in Brighton and take them up to work with Ian, who was part of Cydonia, at the studio that they all used in the SE23 district of London, which is where I went in I guess it was autumn 1997 to do an interview with Cydonia for Dream Creation that came out in the January issue, I think. It was definitely published in December. So obviously it was a couple of months before that. So I was at that studio. And then, Nick and Ian would work on things together there from these, things that Nick had started off down in Brighton. And up there, they also had Yamaha and MS-10, Nord Lead with its squelchy high melodies. So Nick got into Goa music thanks to Dino, who seems to have introduced a whole lot of folks. I think it was Dino's brother who took him for the first time as well. And so, that got Steve Ronan and, Ian involved as well, and Jyoti, I believe, also. So Nick just loved the sound and vibe, and he said that a lot of people call this music dark, and for him, he says there's a toughness, and I think that's a really, really interesting distinction. I think it's one actually worth exploring, right? Because this is kind of gnarly, and we can say grungy without it necessarily being sort of grunge rock, although it can sometimes have some of those elements. But I think that's sort of, this is where the music can pack a punch and is not necessarily dark just because there's a grittiness or some power and intensity to it. And I think all of these are different qualities which we can find in a lot of this great music. Now, Nick was into hardcore and breakbeat, loved LFO and Scientist melodies and, Front 242. So all these different elements were informing what he was producing. And he said trance music at the time was special because of its melodic content. It was really, really important. And as a lot of people have noted, that's something that's sort of fallen by the wayside, where things I think did go dark instead of just actually tough. And you have toughness with a melody. I think there's an interesting contrast, an interesting blend, just as I've talked about quite a bit lately, how the human experience is a blend of different emotions, some of them contradictory at the same time. And so, how do you have this toughness and this intensity while there's a beautiful melody? That's actually something we're going to be hearing today. They had their different backgrounds, and one of the things was that they brought a different kind of drum programming, because there was also an exploration into breakbeats and stuff like that, and they wanted to bring in that industrial toughness and use percussion differently, not just hi-hats on the 2s and 4s and stuff like that. So there's really interesting breaks that have a more, I think, creative use of percussive elements that we'll be hearing. Nick also added that layering and texture and toughness of the bass were all important. It's the industrial sound, but with the repetitiveness of the melodies, and short breaks and fills, which I really like. It's kind of filling in some space instead of just a break. Right? But it's a sort of shift in dimension and fill that lead back into more and more layering. When it came to the title, he said there wasn't anything really specific, but around this time they were really into one-word titles. And with Planet, it just felt cosmic and kind of otherworldly. So I think it's, that's pretty appropriate. And so, really their intention was just about the journey, layering, building, creating, all of these structures to draw people into a trance, and then do breakdowns with breakbeats, and then poof, you're back into it. And he said the sub rhythms and sub harmonics were important, right? So all of these wonderful different layers. Thank you, Nick, for all of that fantastic background. Now, for me, again, I got that record probably in the latter half, I think, of 97. Certainly when I left, might have been when I was leaving the UK in February 98, that I definitely made trips around to all of the labels and picked up what I could and got my hands on this one. And so then I showed up at this party in, there was Book to Play, March 15th, 1998, at the back of the Art Gallery in Vancouver. And the setup was such, I was playing off of DATs mostly, and I would usually copy my records, any records that I did have, onto DAT. And I showed up there, and I had to alternate between the two. And I only had 30 minutes, which meant 4 tracks. And this was the second I knew I was going to end with Deltas Traveling at the Speed of Thought. And I was kind of like, ooh, here's our planet traveling at the speed of thought. And so I kind of led into it with that. And, the reaction was pretty fantastic. So how about we listen to this fantastic track by Semsis, by Ian Riv and Nick Smith, called Planet. I love this Something Wicked This Way Comes opening, right? Notice that build up is sort of that granularity and that texture of that bass line too. Well, there's these two voices playing together well. Then creative drum roll. And notice the rhythm. That voice. Then another drum roll. These intervals are really fascinating. There's largely what plays out is going to be a minor third and a perfect fifth, but there's some other intervals coming later on as well. And notice that orchestral, this change in voicing there. That with that element there. And that accent coming on an off beat. right? Not the first beat of the bar. And then just dramatic. Notice again all of the different, what's happening at different frequency ranges and the different textures all getting along. So here, that's the minor third and then perfect fifth. Then we get that echoing and that gating happening with those on that upper level. Another line brought in there. And then really quite dramatic and emotional. And then really clever break, right? To just build tension and the same content continues, but deepens as a result. Very clever. Listen to those, all of those sounds. Very Infinity Project, right? With all that squelchiness. And with that, the bass line with those beautiful melody intervals. And then more alien voice-like sounds here. And again, all that percussion. And really, you know, big system in that state, trance state, it's all voices. And same with these emanations over here. There's sort of like, you know, messages being beamed down from another planet. And then higher octave gives it more drama, more importance. And we come back to this interval. Notice that continuing the deepening and the continuing ongoing presentation of this riff, and then those voices come back, and just that chopped up voicing there. It's just like things are oscillating between dimensions. And then we get those fantastic intervals at minor third and perfect fifth. That squelchiness from the introduction coming back in, and notice the layering. I mean, it's really sort of buried under there, but still packing a punch. And now it gets more dramatic here. Goes up to a seventh. Minor seventh, I should add. So, I mean, just really, you know, the harmonic language and the framing of this, it just, you know, they're not just sticking with one pattern, and so it's all really evolving into storyline. then notice the breakbeats right for this breakdown. And all of those squelchy sounds, I mean, just really rich and textured, and sort of laser beams coming from all these other planets. Right, and builds up, and then I mean, really, wow, right? I mean, it's pretty unbelievable stuff. I mean, it is really cosmic music, like interstellar. What do they listen to on another planet? So you're kind of like zoomed out really with a lot of this music. I find, it gives you this sort of overview of, it was my first experience at the first party that I went to. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is like just being on another planet. And kind of zoomed out and seeing our planet from a different perspective, and seeing other planets from a different perspective. And just absolutely phenomenal music. So what I love about this is it's got that intensity, right? That toughness that Nick spoke about, but there's that refinement also, right? And there's the beauty of the melodies, and there's the power of those intervals. And so those melodies are all hummable and they're all repeatable. And then there's these different interval patterns that sort of take, progress through this journey. And then sort of, later on in the track, then all of a sudden, we get that dramatic sort of lift up to that minor seventh. And it's like, whoa, that's a new interval that wasn't there before. And so really, really creative composing, and beautifully engineered, beautifully put together. I mean, just right, chef's kiss, gentlemen. Really fantastic stuff. So again, a track that I just really love, and as I said, it really packed a punch when I played it in. It was pretty new. When I played it at that party in Vancouver in the spring of, or just before the spring of 1998. It only appeared on CD once, and it was mislabeled. So the other side of the vinyl was Sound Vandal, and one of those great German compilations. I mean, there were some fantastic ones coming out. Trance, Volume 5, it was listed as Semsis Sound Vandal, that the track was actually Planet. So it was actually this track that was on there. So there we go. All right. Well, I am going to sign off here and leave you with the complete magical production by Semsis. Came out on Dragonfly, in which I've just loved for nearly 30 years ever since. Planet.